People often ask me, how should we remunerate our directors? It's a great question. You want your remuneration to be market competitive to attract the right people. You also want to be fair to your directors, amongst other factors. So typically there's a number of criteria that come into account in remunerating directors. The first is the nature of your company. ASX listed, private, public, not-for-profit, etc. Secondly, it's the size of the company. That's determined by annual revenue, by asset base, FTE. Thirdly, industry and company-specific matters. Are you in a high-risk industry? A director's exposed to higher risk because of the nature of the company and the activities it undertakes or is undertaking at a particular point in time. Fourthly, director-specific skills and experience can come into account. Some of those skills and experience can be in high demand and therefore sometimes will feed into the level and structure of director remuneration. And then finally, economic and business conditions are also another factor. So how do you then look at that structure and level? Well, I think the thing to start with is, what are we going to remunerate directors by way of a base annual fee? And I strongly recommend a base annual fee as opposed to meeting fees. Meeting fees are administratively cumbersome, but they're also counter to the notion that a director's role is 24/7. The other thing I have seen is a tendency in some companies to add more meetings in order to increase remuneration. So base annual fee paid on a regular basis. There's some add-ons then that you might have to that base annual fee. So the first one obviously is the chair of the board, and typically the chair is paid at least double that of a non-executive director. Increasingly also, there's add-ons for board committee work. And I think that's fair, particularly where there's an uneven distribution of effort that's going into board committee work by directors. So usually the more active and therefore committees with higher workloads will be paid more. So for example, your audit and risk committees might be remunerated at a higher level than, say, your nominations committee. And again, in the committee structure, committee chair should be paid at a higher rate than a committee member. A few other things to bear in mind when you're looking at director remuneration. Firstly, really good to get independent external advice. Directors are inherently conflicted in setting their own remuneration. Secondly, what are the factors that you've got into account to make sure that directors are meeting the expectations and the performance standards that are required of them? And that's through things such as board and director evaluations. It's also really useful to look at regular reviews of director remuneration. On an annual basis, it might only be a CPI increase, but if there's been a real structure in the nature, size or risk that is associated with the company, then that's a good trigger to get another external review. And lastly, if you're involved in a not-for-profit organisation, it's really important to check the constitution and funding agreement to make sure that there's no impediment or other factors that are relevant to setting director remuneration. So hopefully that's given you some good food for thought on how to remunerate your directors.